Good morning and welcome back to Gaming with ADHD. Now, with our kids out of school for the summer, just like many of you, we're going to be getting out of town for a few days to have some fun. Of course, this means leaving the game collection behind. But that doesn't mean that we have to leave all of the games at home. So today I wanted to take a few minutes and talk about games that I'm going to be taking with me on our trip and why I chose them. So this year, my parents invited us to come along to their timeshare and get out of the Arizona heat for a few days. Now, we're actually kind of lucky because our kids are engaged in some other activities that week. And so my wife and I jumped at the idea for just the two of us to go. Now, we've gotten to go in the past, and I always end up with delusions of gaming grandeur. I've taken many different games. I've taken storage crates full of games, and then I don't really play many of the games that I brought with us. Now, admittedly, that is absolutely my fault. It is what it is. But I want to talk about some games that I'm going to bring this time because my mom also noticed that I tended to do that. So she said that this year I could bring two. Two? Only two games? How do I decide? Well, that's like somebody asking me what my favorite game is. I don't have a good answer for that. So I compromised with her and I told her that I would limit myself to 5 different games. So that way, there are options if for some reason some of the games I bring they don't like, but we have a few varieties of games to play because we will also be there for most of a week. So, with that being said, let's look at my criteria for the games that I am taking on vacation. So first off, I wanted games with a flexible player count. Typically playable between 2 and 8 players. That's ideal, but not mandatory. As I said, my parents are going to be there, but I know my brother is also going to be in town as well, possibly one of my sisters and their families as well. So having games that can play larger amounts of players as well would be very, very helpful. Okay. Second thing is I want them to have a small playing footprint. The smaller playing footprint is because the timeshare is basically a 1-bedroom apartment. So it's nice. It's got plenty of room, but there's just a small 3-foot circular table or a counter. So there's not a lot of places to play very large footprint games. So, no dungeon crawls or, Twilight Imperium or, some other large format board game. The next thing is I wanted them to be able to store compactly, okay? Meaning, we're already traveling. There's already limited space in what we can bring. And so the smaller the box that you can get, the easier it'll be to travel. Another thing to keep in mind is that most game boxes, they just contain air. So you don't always need to bring the box that looks great on the shelf, but maybe a bit more difficult to travel with. In addition, with the majority of the content being air, you can actually use that to your advantage by actually packing some games in with other games so that you get a couple of games into a single box. Now, the fourth criteria I had was I wanted lighter weight games. Now, an epic dungeon crawl is absolutely fun, and it's great when you have some time off, but when traveling, you may not have gamers or family members that are at the same skill level. So games that are lighter weight, to me, can be more accessible and to the newer players, But lightweight doesn't mean that it can't be fun. That doesn't mean that you can't enjoy the game. Now, I also had a fifth category, but the ADHD squirrels took off with it. So we're just going to stick with 4. All right. So the first game that I put on my list is one that I put on pretty much every list. And that is Uwe Rosenberg's Bonanza. This is one of the oldest games in my collection. I absolutely love it. It is a trading game where you are a bean farmer looking to make the most money by trading, growing, and harvesting beans. Players need to just manage a hand of cards. And so let's look into those 4 criteria and see why I chose Bonanza. So first off, the official game says that it needs 3 to 7 players. It does include instructions for 2 players, although I've never used it. I'm not a big fan when a game takes a game and says you need at least 3, and then kind of makes up some rules that are different from the actual gameplay just to make it work for 2. So, not saying they're bad, just saying it's not for me. But with Bonanza, we've also been able to play 8 or 9 players. It's got much lower scores because obviously you're burning through the cards a lot faster, but I have done it. So, and it's still fun. Now, another great thing about this is it's a card game, and so it has a really small footprint. The footprint requires a space for the deck, a little bit of room to put the cards out when you're in the trading phase, and then each player needs some space where they can put their stacks of cards in front of them. But overall, very, very small footprint. Now, the box is also very small. However, you can abandon the box. Like in my case, I have the game memorized at this point. I don't need to reference the rules probably ever again. And so I can just leave the box at home and just bring the cards with me and still be able to play the game and have a lot of fun. And as far as accessibility, this is a fantastic intro game. I have taught many people to play this game across the age ranges and gaming skill levels. So, that's the first game, Bonanza. And the second game that I'm going to take is Carcassonne. Carcassonne, again, is one of the oldest games in my collection, and I think it fits into the category of a travel game really well. So, just off of the base game, it supports 2 to 5 players. If you get the first expansion, which I think is a mandatory, you get pieces for a 6th player. So I'm just going to say it supports 2 to 6 players. However, you can go online and buy collections of the different meeples from the game and from the different expansions from third-party sources. And so you can actually support more than the 6 players if you want to play that way. It's a little different. I have done some larger games, but not necessarily for everyone, but it is an option if you want to do so. Now, as far as its footprint, players are building the board together. So it's a variable size, but as I said, for the timeshare, it's got about a 3-foot round kitchen table, and that's plenty of room to play a normal game of Carcassonne. You may have some issues if you have a lot of expansions, but for the most part, you should be okay. Another nice thing about the footprint is, which actually I guess this would be more for the travel portion of it. The box is about medium sized, but the game does come with a bag to put the tiles in for drawing, and you can just bring the bag of tiles, take the meeples that come with the game, put them into the bag as well, and just travel with that. You don't need to bring the scoreboard. You don't need to bring the extra tiles for scoring. Just get a piece of paper and every time you score, write that down for that particular player. So you can get away with just a bag of tiles that you can usually fit in somewhere around your socks and your underwear. Finally, this is my personal favorite gateway game. It's easy to teach, it's easy to learn, and it's very accessible at all skill levels. So, absolutely, Carcassonne is going with me when I go on vacation. Now, the next one's going to be a little controversial. Some people like it, some people hate it, but I think for a travel game, I think it fits very well. And that's Steve Jackson Games' Munchkin. Now, I chose Munchkin because, again, it's a classic game that parodies Dungeons and Dragons with a lot of just silly humor. And that's one of the main reasons that I put it in the game. You're on vacation. You're not trying to be serious and think strategically all the time. Sometimes you just want to have some fun and laugh at the Shadow Nose. If you get the reference. Anyways, so as far as the player count, you need obviously at least 2 players, but you can technically play with any number of players. I've played with games, I believe up to about 10, but it really stacks very well. You may need to get a couple of expansions if you want to go to some of these larger groups, but for the most part, you can do that. Another option, if you want to include more players, also consider getting another base game of Munchkin. So if you have Munchkin, combine it with actually, say, Munchkin Bites, the horror-themed version where it has all the classic monsters. Or in the past, we've combined it with Munchkin Cthulhu. Munchkin actually, because everything can combine, sometimes it's really fun to take 2 different versions of Munchkin and mix them together, but that also gives you a bigger set that you can run larger games with. So, it is technically better in the 4 to 6 player range, but like I said, no limit on the players. Now, again, this is a card game. Very limited or very little table space is required. You're going to need space in front of you for the cards that you've played, but other than that, a spot for the treasure and the door deck, that's really all that you need. Now, as far as portability, again, ditch the box, just takes the cards. Okay, if you've added a lot of expansions, chances are you've already moved in to the box organizers that Steve Jackson Games provides. And if you do, great. You've already got a lot more cards, and it's already been combined and condensed into a more easily transportable spot. Now, as far as how well it fits on the light game spectrum, it is a great gateway game. I've actually introduced many people into gaming through using Munchkin. It's a lot of fun. It's a great way to just laugh, be silly, and and play some games together. Now, the next one was a bit of a smaller release, but it's actually one that I think is great for taking on a vacation with you. And that's the game Mangaka from Japanime Games. Now, this is a game about drawing comics. Specifically, in this case, Japanese-style manga comics. However, they did also produce another version called Cartooner, which is more about American-style comics. And what you're going to do in the game is you're actually going to draw a comic strip. Now, don't worry, you don't actually need, great artistic skills because you don't have a lot of time to draw these comics. So, stick figures aplenty. But basically, you're going to use cards to get different themes and categories so that you get direction in how you're supposed to make your comic. Okay? So, really, you can support any number of players. You can even play it by yourself if you're bored. Okay? You can play it with more players, but it will slow the game down. So do keep that in mind. But you can easily get a 6 to 8 player game and still be pretty comfortable. Now, you will need room to draw with this, okay? Hard surfaces are very helpful. Maybe you have books or clipboards, but having enough room that everybody at the table can draw their comic without tearing the paper is an absolute must. So that may be a little difficult for this, but it's still useful. Now, the box is not required to take this game. It's a deck of cards and some sheets for drawing the comics. Personally, I've added erasers and pencils just into the box, and I just keep them there. And it actually ends up with a lot more air because they were catering towards the shelf space. But going back to what I said earlier about packing games together, there's a lot of room in here that maybe you could take your Carcassonne bag of tiles and put it in here, or putting in the Bonanza cards. There's a lot of space in here that you can play with to actually reduce the amount of stuff that you're taking with you. And as far as accessibility of the game, it does require creativity. Coming up with a story, being able to draw, it does require a little bit of skill, but again, it's not really art skills, and you don't even have to be great. In the times that I've played it, sometimes, when you're rushed and you're drawing something and you're just being silly, it makes it a lot more fun. And it's not like a game where you're just hoping somebody likes what you wrote or drew. You're actually just trying to meet with the particular categories and themes that are required. And as long as you do that, whether it was funny, whether it was good, doesn't matter. You're still going to get your points. Okay? Now, the last one is great, which it's Dixit. Let me start over. Dixit is a storytelling game where you are trying to convey a story about an image on a card. And you want people to be able to guess what that image is, but you don't want everyone to guess it. And so in the game, you are going to pick one of your cards, tell a story about it, and everybody else will give you one of their cards that they think matches the story that you just told. So if you can get almost everybody to guess your card, then you win points. And if you get no one to guess your card, you don't get any points. So it's very flexible. I recommend it for at least 4 people. That way you have enough different suggestions or different cards played for the story. But I have, like, they've put out versions before where it supports up to 12 players. Personally, I think it plays best with less than 8, but honestly, you can go wherever with this. Now, it is another card game. It requires very little space. In this case, you're going to need a space for the deck and a space to display all of the cards that are used in the round. But that's about it. Okay? As far as keeping score, it does come with a scoreboard, but honestly, I recommend just leaving it home and tracking your score on a piece of paper. So, finally, anybody can play Dixit. We've played it with our kids when they were very little. That was a bit harder because they were very, very literal, but in the end, they were still able to play and have some fun. So, I really recommend Dixit just because it's, it does require some skill to come up with a story, but it doesn't require you to be the next best-selling author. Okay? Now, I do have one bonus option that I definitely recommend. Now, I've been at my job for quite a while, and when I hit one of my anniversaries, they gave me an iPad. And this has been absolutely fantastic for playing games when I travel. Not only do I have an app where I can track all of my stats, many of you watching this are probably already familiar with it, but it also has a lot of apps that are really good and just based on regular board games. So as far as the number of players, you're only limited by the number of players in the app. In addition, you don't even need any table space. You can sit around on the beach. You can, sit on the couch. You can sit around a campfire and just keep passing the iPad to whoever's turn it is. You can also take all of the games that you can find. There are some great app versions of games on the iPad. Personally, I really like Alhambra and Carcassonne, but there's Terraforming Mars. There's Star Realms. There's so many different options for games that you can play just on your iPad. And finally, great apps, they're going to teach you how to play the game. So if you've wanted to get it to the table, sometimes getting the app is a way that you can learn the game, or sometimes it's a way that you can learn the correct way to play a game. There have been multiple times where I've actually learned how the rules are supposed to work in a game that I've played for years by playing the app. So, anyways, those are my suggestions. Those are the 5 games that I'm taking with me when I go on vacation, plus my iPad. But what do you think? Okay, what games do you like to take with you? Please put them down in the comments. Obviously, my mom limited me to 5, but I'd like to know for next time. So, what games are you bringing? What games have you brought in the past? What's your favorite game to take when you're traveling? At the end of the day, let's just play more games. But I thank you for watching. If you liked the video, please do give it a thumbs up. It does help the channel grow. In addition, if you haven't yet, I would love it if you subscribe to the channel. I'm growing, I'm putting out a lot more content, and I'm having a lot of fun with it. But it does make it a lot more fun if people want to watch it. So, put your comments down below. Look forward to hearing from you, and we'll talk to you next time. Thanks for watching.